Another housing question for you.
Okay.
We have a lot of those today. It says, our house in our old town is filled with grief and we don't like it. We don't want to be landlords and may not move back, but can't buy as cheap now, obviously. Does selling it equal emotions dictating a financial decision? And I wanted to just add how, like, sometimes we want something or there's emotions involved. So how do you parse through how to still do that the right way?
I don't know that I completely understand the question.
You got to take back. So
they want to sell their house,
but they admittedly in a town they moved out of.
Okay.
Yes,
and it's filled with. She said, or they said, filled
looks like
with
some grief has happened while they're there. Okay. They don't really love it anymore.
Like
they want to
tenants
move
or something.
No, it could be somebody, a loved one passed away there or something. You never know.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, and so we don't want to be landlords. And we're not going to move back.
Like they don't want to move into it. They want to sell it.
Does
but
selling it equal emotion?
Yes.
Yeah. Here's the problem, especially with first homes or with homes, and we see this all the time. Homes are emotional assets, whether we mean for them to be or not. They are. They can be emotional in the sense of, oh, that's where we got married. That was our first home. That's where we brought our baby home from the hospital. That's where they learned to walk. That was this first and that first. Or it can be, like you said, it can be grief. Oh, that was the house that I had a loved one who's no longer here. And we assign a lot of emotion to it. Or we may just say something, man, I love this house and it is worth this much in my mind and I would never sell it for less than this much. And that may not be what the market commands. And so that's why I do think houses can be very, very emotional and very, very difficult. And this is one of the areas where I do think that a real estate professional who actually knows the market and understands it well can be an asset. Because what you don't want to do is a lot of us say, all right, I'm going to go to this transaction. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to put the for sale sign out in the yard. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to save on all the real estate commissions. I'm going to get a better deal, better for the buyer, better for the seller. And while that may be true, the actual cost that might exist is you not recognizing how emotional this decision is. It's difficult to say, and Brian, maybe you have some better insight than I do, in this situation if selling the house would be emotional or not, because you've said some things that I love. I don't want to be a landlord. We're not going to move back into the house, and housing has gone up. You said it's not as cheap as it was back then. So those are three things that kind of lend itself to maybe selling this house is an emotional decision. Maybe analytically, it's actually the best decision, the most advantageous
And that's
decision.
what I was going to say. Look, if you have a house, and here's something you ought to know from a tax perspective, is that if you lived in this house 2 out of the last 5 years, so if you moved away less than, 3 years ago, or 4, if you lived in it you got the 2 years and 5, and maybe you've moved away now for a period of time, but it still qualifies for that tax-free gain. That's $250,000 tax-free for a single individual. That's $500,000 for a married couple of tax-free gain. And post this inflation run we've had, a lot of houses have really appreciated a lot. So if you have a house that is out of community, because you know what's hard about being landlord when you don't live in the same area? It's hard to keep up with it, to see what the tenant is doing within the place. So I get it if you don't want to be a landlord. And if this thing has some emotional baggage or some memories that you're just having trouble processing, and you also don't want to keep up with it, yes, let's figure out how we get out of this so that you can move on with your life. And I do like something Bo said. If you don't, because I don't want you to make an emotional decision and make mistakes. Maybe you're underprice it, or maybe you just make a misstep because you know that you have some emotional baggage with this house. Then why not get a professional to kind of help you and find somebody, really get word of mouth, talk to people in the community, because not all real estate agents are created equal. I just did a transaction down in Florida and had an outstanding real estate agent. But I've had real estate agents in the past where I felt like I was doing the work more so than they were. So just make sure you do your due diligence. Find somebody that can be your partner in this transaction and protect you from your blind spots, but also be your local boots on the ground versus it sounds like you're living in a different community and you have some emotional blind spots on this, but also do the measurement on the taxes to see if this is going to be a tax-free gain for you.
How about this? Can I extend this question just a smidgen? What about someone who doesn't necessarily want to own the house in the old community, but maybe it makes sense to rent it for whatever reason or not? Maybe housing prices haven't come back or something. Is there a scenario, or do you have an experience share where okay, maybe I rent for a season until I can actually sell the house. Is that something that could be viable?
What Bo's hitting on is I fell into this. When we moved up to Tennessee, my house in Georgia, you couldn't give them away back then. I mean, South Atlanta housing back pre this inflation run of the pandemic, it was just hard to sell a house.
And not really recover from the Great
Recession. Remember, I had shared that I bought my house in 2003, 2004. It appreciated before the Great Recession, but then post Great Recession, it went down in value by over 50%. I know that sounds crazy to say out loud, but it's true. It went down by over 50%. The bank ripped out my home equity line. It was a pretty rough thing, and it did recover. But I had a loss. Can you believe I sold that house at a loss
crazy.
Still in 2019?
People think that's like asinine. How can you lose money on real estate?
Now, look, if I'd held it for 2 more years, I would have made back and then even had a profit. But when I couldn't give the house away when I moved to Tennessee, because had life things going on that required us to move, I rented it for actually a year and a half. So I still qualified, even though I didn't need the tax-free gain because I had a loss. I would have qualified with this answer of living in the house 2 of the last 5 years. But it is one of those things I think you kind of have to look at your scenario, mitigate the damage that's going on. What I didn't want to have a house just sitting there in a community I no longer lived in. It was better to have a tenant there that could kind of look after it. Plus, I created some cash flow. Now, full disclosure, I had a great tenant. They're a really good tenant. But even a great tenant ruined my hardwoods. And I had to completely, once they moved out, and I decided to finally sell it because the market had gotten a little better, I had to completely redo the hardwoods. And that was kind of frustrating, but that's what it's like to be a landlord.
It's one of the things you have to do.